I have started to stream.
Tony Caravan.
You've been subjected to a highly sophisticated form of propaganda.
It's just what you need, and not what you
Don't.
Quality, quantity, and variety.
ROCKFLUX.
Let's get this show on the road.
Hello.
Hello.
This is insane.
Yeah, this is insane, but you know, what can I say? There's a red dot on my screen that if I click, are you sure you wish to remove the image today? The answer is no. Good morning, folks, and if I haven't stated it, I'll let the computer state it for you.
Good morning.
Okay.
All right. I didn't have my coffee yet. Here it is. It's a deep roast. Let's see if we can do this right. This is a dashiki. This is a dashiki. Okay. This is a dashiki. I mean, this is a beret. Now, beret and dashiki don't necessarily go together, but, you know. And this is a heart attack. Dashiki. I finally got it. It was supposed to be delivered on Friday. It came Sunday. Which is also kind of quite bizarre when you think about it. You know, that the post office, the United States Post Office delivers Amazon's mail on a Sunday, but they won't deliver yours. You know, billion-dollar company doesn't pay taxes. Pretty crazy. The title of this show, well, first of all, I'm going to say in my chat, dashiki and beret, or beret, which is the proper, I guess, pronunciation from the standpoint. And it's August 16th, 21st, Strange Days Ahead. And as if you need to be reminded about that, or anyone even has to tell you that. Strange Days Ahead. It's a Monday. And actually, to me, it feels like a Friday. It's pretty weird. I'm tired. You know, I'm tired. And it's 5:36 a.m. And I rolled out of bed probably just about less than a half hour ago. So I haven't been literally, well, I wasn't on my feet that long to begin with. But it's going to be the usual thing. I guess the first 30 minutes, it's going to take me some time to walk up the street. What? No, I mean wake up my whatever, you know.
This is a nightmare. Must be a nightmare.
I did have some strange dreams. I'm thinking I might not take that melatonin, you know, thing. It's not like I had weird dreams or anything bizarre like that. It's just that it really, you know, it seems to be make you more progressively tired rather than get you to sleep. I mean, my antipsychotic pills would be good enough for that. That laugh. That's the Alan Watts in me, I guess. I got that from him. Doesn't that sound like an Alan Watts? That Alan Watts laugh a little bit? Yeah, you got to admit it. So, I guess I should be paying more attention to you. Title card of the day, the morning show, hosted by yours truly.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
And that's our star. And our star was called Sol, and we are in a solar system. I'm wearing a beret, and this is the dashiki. You can't see too much of the dashiki, though. You know, which is kind of sad. I don't know if I could tilt the monitor down just a tad for a second. It's kind of quite colorful. But and you missed the on-air light. But I can look at the hand. I can keep it tilted down a little bit. There's nothing there to hide, right? And you might get a better glimpse of me drinking coffee for all that matters. So, I guess it's time to talk about
the Weather Watch forecast.
All right. And let's take a quick look at the weather, this place we call home. Here in the former United States, like I said, at 5:36 a.m., I believe I said standard time. It's Eastern Daylight Time, right? We go back to standard time in, I don't know, sometime. I don't know when that is. I think it's August. I'm not sure. I mean, not August. I mean October. Is it October? Now that I open my big mouth, let me double check for you. Let's go. We're in August, September, October. Let's look here. No, I don't think it's November though. I mean, I'm pretty sure. Daylight savings time is November 7th. So Eastern. I was right all along. It's Eastern Standard Time, right? Because daylight savings time is the 7th of November. And this says it was issued 4:55 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time on this thing. So either the people at NOAA and the National Weather Service are wrong, or I don't know, something's just weird. All right, let's take a look at this map. As I always say, in my neck of the woods, currently, I'm going to have to double check this. I didn't go outdoors. Usually I open the front porch door and just get a real feel thing. It's 68 degrees outside in the mid-Atlantic states, and we're getting up to only a high of 70. There's an 80% chance of rain today, so it's going to be a rainy days in Monday. Remember that Carol Carpenter song? Rainy days and Mondays get me down. 68 tonight. It's going to be 68 degrees every night this week. No weird. But in the daytime, starting tomorrow, we're going to get back up to 79, 77, 79, 81. So basically, we're going to kind of. I was going to say rotate, but I meant levitate. Or basically just float around 80. But today's going to be cool and rainy in the mid-Atlantic states. And I would imagine that'll follow through into the Northeast. And if you want to really know for sure, just take a look at the map. As you can see, there's rain and a chance of thunderstorm dipping up to New York State, throughout Pennsylvania, Ohio, lower part, most of Indiana, I guess. And then into the whole Southeast, through the coast. There's a couple clear spots in Missouri and Arkansas, and one in Oklahoma and a piece of Texas, which is strange. And then it heads still out to Arizona, where they, like I say, they're kind of getting some monsoon. There's little plops of possible rain and thunderstorms in sort of the northern eastern part of California going into Nevada. I'm sure they'll appreciate that. Desert land. Rain up in the extreme Pacific Northwest. And there's still some fire risk up in the upper part of Montana. Now, we see heavy rain and flash floods are possible in, I'd say, the whole central to western PA, eastern Ohio, down into eastern Kentucky, and all the way over to D.C. And getting into Virginia, and then a little strip down into Tennessee and that part of the country as well. And then, of course, we have Tropical Storm Fred, which is, we're going to look at that a little bit closer on the map, on the actual satellite, which is coming up the Gulf Coast. And there's Tropical Storm Grace out there in the, it's still a tropical depression, actually. And, fortunately, I don't think it's going to cause too much of a problem in Haiti, on top of that earthquake they had. And there's a tropical depression 8 out in the mid-Atlantic, and Hurricane Linda is still lurking in the Pacific, just off of the Baja Peninsula. So that's a look at the weather. And before we get into signing off from the weather, let's look at the image of the day. And the image of the day, which has suddenly got ginormous, which is ridiculous because a moment ago it wasn't. This is the NOAA 2-day graphical tropical weather outlook, which we might as well make fairly big. Let's go big with it. Big as we can. And we don't need to see the top stuff, but we really need to see the bottom. And this was 4:59 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time today. So literally, this is about as recent as you can get. This is the recent satellite images. Now they're saying no disturbances, which I don't know exactly how they call 2 tropical depressions and a tropical storm no disturbances. It's kind of weird. That's weird. So it looks like the western Gulf Coast of Florida and into the Panhandle, and that a little bit, if it takes veers westward, then some other of the Gulf states could have some tropical storm weather. And I haven't seen the exact speed. I lived through a tropical storm, and I've been looking for those. I have some video of it out of a window when I lived. I was took a picture of it while a tropical storm was passing through where I was living. And they usually started around, I believe it's 45, winds of 45 and up. I think a hurricane started at 75. And these tropical depressions, I believe Grace was around 35, up to 35 mile per hour. Now, in this satellite image, unlike the previous image, it looks like Haiti is going to be affected by it, and I guess unless you're in the shipping lanes and that little dot out there in the Atlantic, which I have to admit my ignorance. I don't know what that is. What is that place? All right, what's that dot out there? Unless you're on that little dot, I don't think you have to worry about tropical depression 8. So there you have it. I mean, that's about as good as you can get, right?
The Weather Watch forecast.
Yeah, that's it. So more rain, thunderstorms, and hurricanes, tropical storms, tropical depressions. But then again, it is that time of year. It's that time of year. Yeah, it's getting to be that time of year. Excuse me. The Shiki. Interesting, I was going to put it on, I was going to sell them, But since nobody buys anything, I wasn't going to go through the whole process of trying to get a link onto my website. And besides, if I did, I'd probably only make 20 cents commission or something. Quarter. Yeah. So here we are. Another day minus another dollar. Title card. I guess we could put my text back so you know who I am. And just as a reminder.
You're listening to Tony Caravan Live.
Your papers, please.
You know, that's still going on, this paper please thing. But, you know, I guess this weather and earthquakes, you know, might be coming to the fore. I don't know. I'm not watching the nightly news. I'm only like I said, I try to give you this stuff firsthand. And so I go to the satellite maps and that sort of stuff to see what's happening, weather-wise. And I've taken some, we did talk about, I will look and see what the past two shows we dealt with that homeless issue and my open letter to Apple about solving the homelessness problem, which was rather, I don't know, maybe presumptuous of me, some people might think. But, these problems that face us, the problem with bureaucracies is that, and media, and this is exactly with, we're talking about strange days ahead. Of course, we're already in strange days. But the problem with when you have these bureaucracies, politicians, people trying to get elected, people trying to hold on to their jobs, academics, scientism instead of scientists, right? The scientific process, the search for truth, right? Experimentation, open discussions, arguments about something, testing something to prove it, as opposed to the scientism now, which is just this blind belief in what some person has said who's somehow politically connected or connected to some big pharma company or some sort of, gets funding from some source. And so anyone who questions that, right, that is no longer, and I could see a little circle going on YouTube because I even brought up the idea of that. But the point is, the nature of science is to question it. Science is not a certainty, right? Science is a living, growing thing, right? At one time, scientists, before they were really termed astrophysicists, people who were taken seriously believed that the Earth was in the center of our system, what we now call the solar system, right? And then that was questioned, research was done, data was produced, and then it eventually became obvious that we have a solar system and we revolve around the sun. But, it's funny. I guess it's no different than those days, unfortunately. People were excommunicated, tortured, I guess, burned at the stake over the years for questioning the powers that be, right? And that's why many people, I'm not the only one, refer to it as scientism, because it's become like a dogma, a religion of these people. And when you question it, then suddenly, heresy, right? Heresy. You're spreading false, and it's like, whoa, wait a second, man. How do you know what you don't know what you don't know? And if there are thousands of people questioning a specific thing and are willing to basically make a case, right? then that discussion needs to be had. You don't just say, "Oh, anyone who questions it must be banned," right? Must be burned at the stake, because that's literally what they're doing. And so it's like this whole sun thing, which we're going to talk a little bit about today. But I was trying to say it's what the problem you have when you have media and bureaucracy, people that profit, in some way, or get their content, in the case of the media, which ultimately leads to their profit, advertising dollars. Corporate media is only in business, right, to make a profit. The people you worship, the cult of personality of these news anchors, they're like make $20 million each, some of these people, on cable. All right? So they need a juicy story, right? And they have to keep certain things going. They can't come out and start talking about the truth or interviewing people with, PhDs and, that have alternative opinions, right? Ideas and can demonstrate mathematically or scientifically or talk about experiments that go against what's been getting them an audience. See, people like to be entertained by weird stuff. They want to believe, the people, the functionally illiterate that we talk about, and again, that's a government agency collection of words, not mine. A word they came up with through testing where they showed that people graduating high school and even college were functionally illiterate. In other words, they had poor math skills, poor writing skills, poor reading skills, and poor science skills. And of course, that goes right down the list into geography. They couldn't point out places on a map. They couldn't point out states on a map, let alone where other countries were. I mean, these are people in graduated college or graduated high school, right? So they basically not only don't have the 3 R's, reading, writing, arithmetic, they still know nothing about anything. And then the news is all full of so-called socioeconomic geopolitics, as I, hyphenate all those words together. And they know nothing about that, right? They know nothing about poppy fields in Afghanistan, right? Or the pipeline, right? Oil. It's always been about oil. Now we're back to talking about OPEC again. OPEC was on the verge of being dissolved a couple of years ago. And now they're talking about negotiating with OPEC. I mean, come on. So we got strange days ahead. And when you have people that make a living, and a comfortable one at that, or it's not even a living, who become wealthy, and live this lifestyle, lavish lifestyles. And that includes academics. The lifestyle of an academic is pretty darn good, they get these grants, right? They're doing pretty darn good. And they don't want to lose that grant money. They don't want to lose, some of these professors, goofiest looking guys in the world, got their little trophy wives because, it's like that Janice Ian song, marry young, then retire. And yes, some woman might take offense to that, but the other women know exactly what I'm talking about. Right? Yeah. If you're the captain of the cheerleader team, right? And you're not interested in becoming a CEO, you'll marry the geek, because that geek's going to give you the house with the pool, right? The nice SUV, the good neighborhood, right? And all the stuff you want. Okay? Marry young and retire. Yeah. I heard the truth at 17. I should play that on the guitar. Cat doesn't stay down here anymore because I think he's afraid of the guitar. Well, I told you he is afraid of the guitar, but I mean he's afraid that I'm going to like play it every day or something now, since I've done it a couple of times. I don't know what he's doing. He comes down, gets his meal, he goes upstairs. I guess he's still tired. But I always spray when I leave. I don't know. This is just a thing. I've been doing this way before the unspeakable affected, the world. But I've always sprayed my comforter and bedding down with Lysol when I got up in the morning, because you don't wash a comforter and things like that every day. And it's the same with like chairs, sofas. I've always been that way because I've had a cat, and cats they're fairly clean animals. It's unlike a dog. You don't have to give it a bath; it gives itself a bath. But it's the idea when it it does use a thing called the litter box. So you want to constantly spray. So in the morning, I usually give my bedroom a little spray with Lysol. I've been doing that for my whole life, And so I don't know what the cat wants to go up there right afterwards, because it usually takes a while before that stuff dissipates. I don't spray the air. That's a contact spray. Lysol is a contact spray. Unless you could find Neutra Air, which is very hard to find. Neutra Air does get rid of the bacteria and viruses in the air, but Lysol doesn't. It's a surface spray. A lot of people don't know that. It looks like an air freshener. Some people just use it like an air freshener, and they're fools because it's not doing anything. It's just dropping to the floor, I guess. And so I don't know how I got on that thing. I was really trying to make a stronger point about the media and bureaucrats, how they push these falsities for the sake of their own benefit, Well, anyway, here we have a picture of our star on the title card of today's show, with this solar ejection, which is based on, you see how it's like magnetism. Everything's like, when you're dealing with the sun and the earth, it's you can't talk about them without talking about magnetism, right? Magnetic fields. And the reason this thing is like kind of in circular, this solar ejection, so to speak, it's like pulled back because it's like it's magnetic. It's the magnetic field, right? And the thing is, it becomes a solar mass ejection if it breaks free of the sun. And that's the scary thing. You get some giant thing like that coming at the earth, and it's curtains. Some people are familiar with the word the Carrington event. It's knocked out, happened in the 1800s, knocked out the telegraph lines. Literally, in many places, they just caught fire. So you can imagine what kind of havoc that thing that happened basically a little over 100 years ago, if that happened again with our power lines and our satellites, we'll be back to the Stone Age. I mean, there's no way they could fix anything. I mean, there'd be some priority around a few major markets in some areas like that. But see, the problem is electromagnetic pulse, like they call it an EMP. It's like everything's electromagnetic. It's magnetism, right? You got to think about that. And the idea is that it will also destroy electronics. So some people might be sitting there. People have heard the term Faraday cage, to protect things. Very few people have a Faraday cage. All right. That would be something you would put a device or something into so that if you did have some sort of EMP, as they call it, electromagnetic pulse, that the sensitive electronics would not be like fried. And then after the pulse, you could pull that out of the box, so to speak, cage, whatever, and you would be able to use it. So there are people that have like this collection of little objects in a Faraday cage, things like a handheld CB type of communications device, you know, little electronic things, a radio, you know, other things like that. You know, if you were didn't want to lose your music collection, you could put an old smartphone or iPod or something like that in there. Set of headphones, you know, mini amplifier. I have one. I think I showed those in one of my shows before. And of course, so you could get back to some kind of, you yourself could just get back to some kind of normal living. But in an ideal world, you would have like some kind of foldable solar panel saved and, you know, all that stuff so that you could have charge this stuff through the sun. And because everyone else or whatever, you know, because eventually what would happen in a case of this, and I'm just rambling. It's like I say, you wake up early and it's like I'm groggy. It's almost like, you know, and it takes me about 10 minutes. Why am I saying 10 minutes? It's already 30 minutes. It takes me about 45 minutes to really wake up now. And I really think either I was woken up a lot of times last night. You know, somebody beeping a horn after midnight or close to 1 o'clock and then knocking on a door somewhere because I had the window open because it was a little bit cooler. So it was nice. It should have been a nice sleeping weather. The dog barking. Heard someone like walking down, you know, between my house, you know, footsteps, you know, that kind of thing. So I guess, you know, I was awakened a few times. So I don't know how to, you know, unlike since this isn't a radio show and I can't play some crazy wild music, you know.
Why are you telling us this?
Because my mind sounds like the tone of your voice. That's why.
You have actually opened the door to another dimension?
Yeah. I don't know why you put a question mark on the end of that.
Really funny. Really funny.
Yeah, it's really funny. That helps. A good laughter helps wake you up. Caffeine doesn't do it. You know, I don't get, you know, the coffee thing, you know, I don't know. So, what am I trying to say? Strange days ahead. It's not about catastrophe, you know, theory, if you want to call it that, hypotheses, or just catastrophism, you know, whatever you want to call it. It's the proper way to pronounce that. It's the idea that in the aggregate, all right, everything that's going on right now, you know, like some people, yeah, I've heard two views of this. One is this idea of chaos, and the other idea is that it's not chaotic at all, right? You know, so it's not chaos theory. It's very organized and very methodical, or, you know. And in another way, I guess, look at it the way I look at things, certainly some things are happening almost cyclically. You know, it's the inevitability of things to occur. I've written about this. I've thought about this often. And the idea is that You know, when people talk about, well, I don't believe in destiny, I believe in free will, and I don't believe, in predetermination. I believe that, we are, we have total control over, over what things to come. Okay. And, and this is a very old argument, very old, goes back thousands of years by those thinkers, philosophers. And, and often I think, when I ponder this, is that if you plant a seed, being this person that, does garden, all right. And man, I'm still getting a lot of tomatoes. This is like a really good food year for me. A really good food year. These tomatoes are so good. I took tomatoes, some zucchini, some onion, even some beans, and a little tiny piece of potato. I'm talking about a tiny little red potato that's only was about that big. Some of that stuff, put it in a pot yesterday with some olive oil and some turmeric and just some basic seasoning. Stirred that up, and the tomatoes turned into like a sauce almost, which actually was good. Boost the lycopene, unlike other vegetables. When you cook out the nutrients, should say, wake up. And the thing was so tasty. If the pot I was eating it out of, because I don't even put it in a bowl. When you live by yourself, it's like I eat it right out of the pot I cook it in with a fork. But if the pot was big enough, I'd lick it like a dog would lick it, or a dog or a cat would lick the last morsel of some tasty meal in its bowl. That's how good this stuff was. Grown in my garden, But we're talking about predetermination. And so we know that there are cycles, and we know we have a connection to the planet. All right. Women understand the concept of cycles very well. Okay. They are basically not victims of it, but I mean, their life is ruled by cycles. All right. So they're basically tied, to this cycle of life. And, and there are many things that we look at. We have seasons. So these are cycles, right? And, you could think of, dozens and dozens and dozens of examples of cycles that you are aware of that are concrete, not up for discussion, not questionable. I mean, these things are real. They happen. As real as reality is. And so, that's part of the equation in this thought experiment or, ponderance. So if we know these cycles exist, all right, and that, as I started to say, I was thinking in terms of finding Eastern Daylight Time or Eastern Standard Time. I mean, I'm against that, don't you? I think, it's one of those things. The majority of people, they constantly do studies that are tired of this thing. They just wish we would get away with it. Nobody wants to set their clocks ahead, set their clocks back, right? 2 times a year. Why? Just forget it, man. It's not like this was made during like World War I or World War II or something, It's totally ridiculous. It has nothing to do with anything anymore. In the wintertime, I look out there, it doesn't help the school kids going to school. It's because there's a school bus that, if they go to school this year, who knows if they will. But there's a school bus, literally, you could see outside my window. Across the street is like a bus stop and a school bus stop. And I used to walk to the grocery store used to open at 6 a.m., which is great. And before I used to do these shows, I'd get up in the morning and I'd like to go to the grocery store. It's just, I'd be the first guy in there. I'd literally be shopping alone in the store. I loved it. And then eventually there was a couple other people, like some people in like a nurse outfits would come in. So they must have been getting off shift at the hospital. And that's who would be in there. Me, and then there would be like a couple of these nurses or, maybe some guy go, and then somebody going who had this, who went to work at 7 a.m., people that start work at 7 a.m. shift and something. And so they'd be coming in, grabbing some items for their lunch or for breakfast or whatever before they go to work. But sometimes I was the only guy in the store, and I used to like that. But anyway, so I would walk down the street, and there'd be the school bus would pick up these kids at various locations, and it was dark, right? And so it's not helping the kids as if like, oh, it's going to be light for kids getting on a school bus. If that's one of the excuses they try to make. And, at nighttime, personally, I go to bed early, so it's like I'm tired of this, like, spring ahead, type of idea. I don't like it being lighted that late. I think nighttime should be nighttime and morning should be morning. Don't mess with Mother Nature and the cycles of life. Anyway. But the other day I looked at, we talked about equinox and the solstice. And equinox is September 22nd, right? And I believe the solstice is usually around like the 21st December or something like that. That's how even Christmas was basically, these holidays we have are built around these ancient cycles, right? Which have everything to do with things from, people keeping track of things or celebrating harvest or, growth seasons, whatever. Changes, Earth changes, so to speak. So, these are cycles. So it, for the most part, we're aware that there's a certain cyclical nature to existence, to the universe itself, right? There's, subtle things that change here and there, People make a big stink about them, but they shouldn't, because, a clock, if you consider the universe as clockwork, something as big as the universe, to expect it to be precision, is insanity. And besides, we don't know what kind of cycles there are within cycles. See, that's another thing, because we live such a short time. Our existence, the universe and the planet, life, is measured in something called deep time. So when you talk about 4.5 billion years, this planet, in the universe, who knows how, like 13 some billion or whatever, who knows, right? It's all theoretical. It's like the Big Bang Theory. It's a theory. But either way, the idea is that which we presume to know through our science, archaeological studies and things of that nature, anthropology, astrophysics, right? The study of certain things, the observable studies, put it that way, as opposed to theoretical studies. that we know that there are cycles, and we do not know, however, the details of those cycles. So when someone says, oh, this is, it's like when people talk about the weather, and this is part of what this, I'm getting into the heart of the matter now, the show's about. Because it's not only going to be, what I'm not only talking about is like the civilization aspects and the fall of Western civilization and the insanity of what's going on around the world and the planet, right? But also, the reason I'm keeping this picture of the sun up, and it's made it as our title card, is because we know we have solar cycles, we measure them, but we do not understand things that go beyond our existence or our civilization. So for approximately, right now we're talking, we go back to the Younger Dryas period, 12,000 some years. We look at indigenous people. I believe, in the Aboriginals in Australia, it was in that same ballpark. If I'm not mistaken, I'm gonna see what they're saying right now. How old are Australian Aboriginal? A new genomic study has revealed Aboriginal Australians are the oldest known civilization on Earth, with ancestors stretching back roughly 75,000 years, which could be also 72,000 years, which would fit into the 12,000-year cycle. Okay? Meaning, and you've got these places like Ayers Rock and some crazy places in Australia where it would be quite possible that the Aboriginals could have survived. And there's some interesting tales that they have. And it's the same with the Native Americans here in the U.S. The various, in the Midwest, these various studies. I guess I could take down the hoodie for a second here. We'll talk about the game over. It's like, I'm in a spot where I'm kind of leaning and it's comfortable and it's like she's in the way. So what I'm getting at is that it all fits together. We have these cycles that currently people are looking at, and they're thinking in terms of 12,000 years, 24,000 years, 36,000 years, 48,000 years, 64,000, 72,000 years, right? That type of thing. Or 76, that would be 76, right? 64 plus, 76. So 75 is actually even closer to 76. And they say approximately. But we know that looking back at the last catastrophe on Earth, they call the so-called Noah's Ark, or the Great Flood event, which is universal. It goes beyond biblical, stories to stories from around every culture around the planet, has a flood story. And so we know that, so we have that 6,000 years ago cyclical flood. And for all we know that every 6,000 years that may happen. But we also have this 12,000 years, from like 10,600, something like that, somewhere 10,4, 10,6 to 12,000 years ago. Göbekli Tepe is aged at around 12,000 years. That seems to be one of the oldest of the modern civilizations. It seemed to be intentionally buried. And then around that same time, the Younger Dryas period was in that
time you had this flash flood and then flash freezing and we've talked about this before, of the woolly mammoths and the giant bears and cats and these creatures that just lived here right in North America that were literally found with food, undigested food in their stomachs, meaning they just ended. You know, it was some kind of crazy catastrophe. It just happened. I'm pouring some more coffee here. You can't see that. You can only see so much of the screen, and I've got the on-air light so far to the top that I have to change that, because when YouTube airs these things, it usually cuts off like a little portion of things. It's weird. You know, it's like the right-hand side. You probably can't see the G on everything you know is wrong right now. I realize that. Now you can, because it cuts things off. Anyway, so what I'm getting at is that as I wake up, and I do feel I'm starting to wake up. This is my last cup of coffee here. And maybe this ROCKFLUX logo, which is also on the screen, makes a little more sense to you now. It's kind of where the show is going. You know, I'm a empathetic person, fat-faced for some reason with the way I'm dressed, but that's just my ego. I don't know. I really don't know. I'm also a goofball, which I guess is a problem for people, you know? It's like you can't like joke around, laugh around, do silly goofy stuff and then carry on a serious scientific, discussion. Right? For some reason. It's a very annoying, it's annoying to me sometimes. People expect you to act a certain way if you want to talk about a certain thing. And it's like, some people are all over the place. It's like, people would be, when I'm out in the garden, 9 times out of 10, I'm listening to classical music. And at other times, and I haven't done it lately, but if I was sitting at my bar, I'm cranking up the music. I could have AC/DC on or something, or I could listen to like oldies and crooners. And I was listening to Frank Sinatra yesterday for lunch. But the idea is that, a diversity of who you are, your likes and dislikes and all that kind of stuff. I'm wearing a dashiki, man. I told the story about, the first time I got bought a dashiki down at the shore. What seemed to be like a ridiculous amount of years ago. 35 years ago. And I've wanted one since, and I found one. Dashiki, man. It's cool. It's comfortable. It's a neat thing. And speaking of the African continent, totally ignored, by the U.S. and other nations. I mean, basically, nobody's even talking about whatever happened to South Africa, right? It was declared a failed state like about a month or so ago. They had apparently, gone from the supermarkets being, burned down to distribution centers. I mean, is there mass starvation there now? What's going on? It's not being covered. But anyway, back to this cycle and this idea that I was trying to bring up is that when you have, if I say or someone else says that every 12,000 years the Earth goes through this nova, all right, and we look back and we go back to these, 12,000, 24,000, 36,000, 48,000, right? These various increments of 12,000 years. and have and show that they coincide with geological, events, and so and that can be proven through, archaeological digs, ice core samples, tree rings, all that kind of stuff, or like I say, finding woolly mammoths with undigested plant food in its stomachs and stuff like that. So through the scientific process, at least the last 12,000 years and even the 6,000 years, there's as concrete as evidence as there can be, something that can be touched, something that can be seen visually, something that can be studied, right? Either under a microscope or just, samples can be brought back to the lab or can be viewed at the Smithsonian or something. That, that's about as much proof as as you need in what we would really call science, not scientism, like 0.004 CO2 and climate change and stuff like that. Like the recent UN IPCC and NASA, has issued some reports out that ignore this sun, this picture I have on the screen, my title card. In other words, it's so bizarre. They're literally like, they take the sun and magnetism out of the equation. The two strongest things that affect life, our life on this planet. And instead they try to say a gas that's only 0.004% of our atmosphere, which makes the trees green, the plants grow, right? In turn gives us oxygen, right? Is somehow destroying the planet. And that this sun, this ball, the Earth, if you look at this thing, the Earth would be the size of if you look at where it says hosted by, the Earth would probably be the size of the O in hosted by, or Tony, right? That's the size of the Earth. Maybe could be even smaller than that compared to the size of our sun. And if you've ever been outside on a sunny day and got a sunburn, guess what? NASA disagrees with you, says, the sun only affects the uppermost atmosphere of the Earth. Like, what kind of idiots do they think we are? This is written in a paper that was just published last week. And the UN IPCC recent report is similar. And they don't even acknowledge the Earth's magnetic field and these magnetic anomalies, and that the magnetic field, in effect functions as a force field around the Earth, protecting us from cosmic rays and solar rays. I mean, there are other factors such as ozone and things like that also keep out dangerous UV rays and things like that. But at the same token, UVB rays, for example, are very important for human life as well, because they kill bacteria and viruses. I mean, basically the sun is, when the ancients, when they say these people worship the sun god, I mean, the sun is essential for human life. Not only does being in the sun, if you're out in the sun for a half hour or so a day, it's boosting your immune system. You're getting vitamin D3 from that. It's activating hundreds of receptors and things within your human body. And on the surface of your skin and the surface of, say, the chair you're sitting on in the area you are, those UVB rays are literally sterilizing. The sun is a natural disinfectant of the earth. Not to mention it makes the plants grow, which give us food to eat. And to see NASA and the UN propagate this insane idea and ignore that there's this ball in the sky, this star that we, have known and, our entire lives, and it gives us life and gives this planet life. it's as if they pretend it doesn't even exist. Insanity. It's insanity, you know? I mean, you know, where the heck is that stupid thing? I gotta play it.
This is insane. This is insane. This is insane. This is insane.
So that's only part of the story. So we have that going on. We have these bureaucrats and these media and these academics that know better. But despite the fact that they know better, they're somehow warping people's minds to thinking, oh, ignore that ball in the sun, and you really didn't get a sunburn, right? And, you know, people who get, you know, vitamin D3 and stuff like that, they don't really have healthier immune systems. And the sun really doesn't, it's like, you know, there's only one thing I could say. Bullshit, man. The way they have tormented the last couple generations through the school system, this indoctrination, conditioning, and programming that I say, you know, these and parents allowing their children to be raised by this nanny state, is why there are very strange days ahead. But I want to more get into this cycle idea. This is just a weird concept now. We're going to take into like the Tony Caravan world. All right. So, yes, you can't argue. There is no argument. Anything put forth by NASA or the IPCC about this so-called man-made global warming, climate change, or whatever, it's not even worth arguing with. They have no grounds and no proof, no evidence, no nothing. Everything they have has been disproven over decades. And the people, and some people like me, can actually hand them, you know, or direct them to actual evidence. All right? It would be like somebody in a courtroom, you know, making some ridiculous claim about something, right? And then some, you know, saying this person did such and such, and you know, they deserve, you know, and then 10 people coming in and saying, no, he was at such and such a place. Here's video footage from from 5 different cameras showing the person was there. You know, blah, blah, blah. You know, in other words, mounting physical video, you know, firsthand evidence that all goes away, the word of some idiot, right? Who just got some kind of like psychotic, you know, grudge or vengeance thing or something. Who knows what? Who knows what goes on in like, what benefit do they get by tormenting children? Right? And what's the media? We know what the media is. The media is making a buck on it. All right? The bureaucrats stand to make a buck on it, right? The corporatocracy makes money off of it, right? Because it's a thing that they can like get some kind of, and the academics, they get grant money from it, so they don't want to go against it. Yeah, it's pretty sad, you know, that these people have sold out humanity for the sake of an SUV, a big house, right? A flat screen TV and an espresso machine or whatever. Backyard pool membership to a country club. It's basically the whole man-made global warming thing is about. It's about a bunch of people that have sold out humanity. They are lying because they want to keep their material things and their lifestyle. And they don't care if they themselves are going to destroy the planet, because that's what's happening. You see? The denial of the truth, which in this case is that there is no such thing as man-made global warming. No such thing. I mean, cities themselves are are warmer. They produce their own climate in effect because of the high concentration of buildings, people, asphalt, HVAC systems, etc. And we have had cities, outgrowth of cities, over the past century where there were no big cities. And I mentioned this before in the show to disprove this whole thing, that's where these people take the temperature and say, oh, see, it's warmer. Well, of course it's warmer in a place. When I lived in Philadelphia, they didn't have Philadelphia has a skyline now. I mean, a unique skyline. Like you can look at it, it's like different cities around, at least, around the world, but like around the U.S. particularly. Well, when I lived in Philadelphia, they didn't have those skyscrapers that basically define the Philly skyline. So now you can look and say, okay, here's Philadelphia. That's Philadelphia. That's New York. That's Chicago, right? You could define. From an aerial view, you can pick out what the city is. Well, they weren't there when I was lived there. Some 35 years ago, right? But they, architects got together and they decided they wanted to have, because Philadelphia didn't really have like a thing, And I know, because I used to fly back then, I told that story. I used to fly from Philadelphia to Erie, several, I don't know, at least once a month or so. So I was in the air often, kind of. I know what it was like flying back into Philadelphia all the time back then, and I know what it was like recently. Since those skyscrapers have been up, and they've been up for a while now. So what I'm trying to get at is that. So that city itself has grown in population, has grown in structurally. They talk about urban sprawl and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, so in that regard, you have temperature increases, and that's where you have the TV stations, and they've got their little thermostats and barometers and stuff on the buildings, and sometimes they do. You ever see they do the news from the top of the building where the TV station is or something? I mean, the weatherman's up there or something. But they don't measure, or airports. I've talked about this, and I'm not going to waste much more time on it. Airports, the weather is taken at the airport. Well, what's the airport? A big black tarmac, right, that absorbs heat like nothing else, right? Do you ever walk barefoot on a tarmac, like an asphalt street, as opposed to walking on something that's like, just regular grass or something else? You burn your feet if you in the middle of, on a sunny day. So the airport, just the tarmac alone. But then you've got these jet engines that are spewing out ridiculous amounts of heat that are taking off and landing in that space. And there you have the weather is taken from airports and cities that are basically, several degrees Celsius above what the temperature is in the real world, the rest of this ginormous planet we live on. Okay, enough said about that. That's just a fact, right? It's just a fact. But they won't acknowledge that, okay? They won't acknowledge that you get a sunburn from the sun so that, in effect, the sun heats the planet up. They won't acknowledge that there's magnetic, field of the Earth, and that protects us from cosmic rays and solar rays and stuff, and that the Earth's magnetic field has been weakening. Though their own papers, decades ago have shown a steady decline in the magnetic field. But, they'll ignore their own data and their own peer-reviewed papers in order to support this current, whatever, madness. It's just madness. Okay. So enough of that. I was talking about free will, predetermined, ism or whatever. And the idea and cycles and grand cycles and things we don't know about. Okay? The things I just spoke about, we know about, but people are just lying to us. See, it's one thing. People lie for all kinds of reasons. The media lies to make money, and the bureaucrats lie, all right, because they have an agenda, some kind of political or, socioeconomic, geopolitical agenda. And academics lie because they want to keep their houses and their grants and their trophy wife if they were lucky enough to get one. All right? So they're lying. They're lying because they have a reason to lie. They're, basically forsaking humanity and everybody else on the planet, propagating a lie for their own self-centered reasons, right? It's too bad that people have to be that way and that we're surrounded by people like that, but that's reality. Accept it. All right, I'm not going to talk about that. The rest of the show is going to be dedicated to this idea and the strange days and briefly what I'm about to get into. And that is that if a seed grows, I was talking about being a gardener. When you plant a seed, the magic of a seed, if you could only see, there's no reason for me even to bring one in. I thought I would bring one. If I brought in a kale seed and had it on my tip of my thumb here, you would barely be able to notice it. It would look like a dot. As if maybe with a marker, extra fine point marker, I accidentally put a dot on the tip of my thumb or something. That's how a kale plant, right? One of the healthiest things for us to eat is kale. It's a dark green. It's good for you, right? In many ways. It's medicine. Food is medicine, which is another reason I don't understand why they're, propagating these lies and causing all kinds of problems and they want to block out the sun. It's like, man, the more sun, the more CO2, the better plant growth. And, remember this planet really belongs to the flora, the trees and the flowers and all that stuff. My head almost looks like it's floating on, it's like this round thing floating on this thing. I guess that's one of the downfalls of the dashiki, There's this thing here where it's stitched. I wish I had a sewing machine because I'd like to stitch it open and make it a little more. Anyway, that's just me, and I don't have a sewing machine, and I'm not that kind of person. I bought one of those hand sewing things, but I never could get it to work because for a while I was trying to darn my own socks, so to speak. Okay, so people are lying to us. We know that. If you don't know that, well, believe whatever you want to believe. I can't, everything you know is wrong. You don't know what you don't know. And people have their own agendas, so they lie. But when you get down to it, because of our short lifespans and because of our short existence on this planet in general, we don't know, the cycles we don't know if there are cycles on top of cycles. You see? Because we haven't existed long enough to know that. And that's another thing that this scientism and people often, it's like they present these things, and news media are the worst at it. But, the academics are also pretty darn bad at it. They present things in very matter-of-factual ways. You ever watch these documentaries on a public television, supposedly PBS, supposedly public television, but it's not. It's like corporate television. It's got corporate sponsors and it's got ideologies and all. It follows a certain dogma and, it's political, right? But when you watch a documentary or you listen to one of these news readers, they'll report something as matter of factual. They won't like preface it or follow it up with the idea of it is believed. Right? They just say, man-made global warming is causing this. Right? It should say that some scientists, right, or some whatever believe that. They say no, it's it's closed. The science is, they do the same with, in medicine and other things, right? And it goes it goes precisely and exactly and, totally against the definition of science. Science is something that is constantly in a state of flux, right? There's certain things, we've believed 200 years ago that have been disproven. There's things we believed 50 years ago that have been disproven. Or there's things we believed 50 years ago that have since been proven, that were theories that have been subsequently proven through, us finding or experiments, and actually finding some kind of concrete evidence, something tangible, real. All right? Not hearsay or not ideological, not anecdotal, or leaving out things like talking about the climate of the earth and leaving out the sun from the discussion. The number one contributor to the climate. It's a minor effect on the climate of the earth. Okay, I mean, it's so laughable, that, and people sit there and go, yeah, and they'll go out and protest, and they'll let these people dim the sun so we can't have food in 5 years or something. Crazy stuff, right? Geoengineering. They're in the middle of it already. They're already geoengineering this planet because of this belief. It's a belief system, scientism. It's a religion. It's a dogma. It's not science. Are there any scientists left? Well, anyway, as I wake up now, finally. 6:51 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, apparently. No, Standard Time. I was right all along. It's NASA that's wrong with that, too, right? And the National Weather Service, right? Eastern Daylight Time. Right? Standard Time. Eastern Daylight Time is until November 7th. Daylight Savings Time. These people are ridiculous. So anyway, you only know firsthand. It's like I always say on this show. I always try to present to you things that I know firsthand. Right? So I want to show you that satellite picture of those storms because we know that was taken by a satellite. Okay? You see me oftentimes on this show, every show. I'll say something, I'm not sure about it. I'll say, let's look it up. And we'll look it up and then clarify it. I may have been off. I openly admit. Sometimes I'm off by something, I think, was it X amount of people did this or whatever? But, no, okay, all right, I was wrong. It's, and we get the exact number. And so that's how it should be, You know what you know from a first hand. You don't take the word of some ideologue or a person with an agenda or somebody who's profiting on it in some way, shape, or form, whether it's financially or, career-wise, politically, or whatever the heck it is, or just through some sort of just evil thing. Evil, These people are rotten to do that. Some of the stuff that comes out of people's mind. I honestly do believe there are evil people on this planet. And I believe that those are the people who are in charge. I believe that the World Economic Forum people have an agenda that is basically anti-human. Anti-humanity, I should say. They really don't like us. They think they're above us. They don't like the 8 billion people on the planet, and they come up with all these different type of things because they're hoping to kill off. They want to kill off basically most of us. And people say, "Oh, you're crazy." It's the truth. Just look at their actions. But anyway, the last laugh is on us. We'll have the last laugh, I should say. Because they're part of the same long-term cycles as we are. And so, people like me, we believe through what we've studied that it seems clear through the archaeological record, right, that there is this approximate 12,000 year cycle where the sun novas and this catastrophe occurs on this planet. Now, I can't say with certainty that there isn't a longer term cycle, right? Or if that cycle, is a 72 or 76,000 or whatever, 72,000 year cycle. And I did mean 72,000 because I'm thinking, But so that it could be a 72,000 years, and then it just happens every 72,000 years for 12,000 years, then it skips another 72,000 years. It's like people have talked about, Yellowstone being overdue for this super volcanic eruption, right? Or the big one in California. So we can only study back what we're capable. We look at these cycles and we see that within our ability to study geology, archaeology, right? Anthropology, right? Astrophysics, locations of stars and what's happening in the cosmos, the visible, through our various telescopes and whatnot. Observable universe and observable planet. That we come up with these cycles, right? And we know that, and we can be assured that those cycles are real within the time frame that we are able to observe. Okay? But just like I say, I try to present to you things that I know firsthand. In other words, if somebody hits a pole out there and I see a car hits a pole, I can take a picture of it with my camera, and I can report it to you. And I'll say, I saw a car hit a pole, and then I'll back it up, and I'll say, here's a picture I just took of it, and look at the timestamp on the photo, And so pretty much so, what I'm telling you happened, right? I not only firsthand saw it happen, it might have happened during a live show, and you actually heard it. What was that? And I'd say, the car just hit a pole. Let me take a picture. Then I take a picture of it and I put it up on the screen. Okay. So we know things like that, and that's what we expect. That's what the news used to be like. Do you remember the days of the news when they actually had reporters in places? Unfortunately, many of them risked their lives. Many died, actually. But, used to have reporters in all locations, or they would send a team out when something was happening. And it wasn't one of these staged events like they do now. When I say staged, I mean like, when, what's his face? That guy, these political things they do, where the FBI leaks that they're going to go to some guy's house, right? And CNN is there waiting, that kind of stuff, right? And then the FBI comes and they make a big pomp and circumstance about it, and it's covered live. And it's like, oh, well, we were like kind of staking him out because we kind of had an itchy feeling, an inkling that this might occur. It's like, yeah, right. Normally the procedure would have been, a neighbor or somebody would have reported, hey, there's some activity going on the street, and reported it to something. And the news media used to monitor like CB radios, police band and stuff like that. They'd hear there was some activity, and then the news team, which was usually on call 24 hours, there was always somebody there 24 hours a day, and they would send out a cameraman and and an announcer. And if it was off hours, it was usually one of the, an intern or somebody green, and that would be their big chance, to cover this story, right, that occurred. But you don't see a lot of that stuff happening. It's hearsay. It's like the Associated Press, right, and Reuters and things like that. And, have some of these people around the world, different places. But even them, and then a lot of times you have to look close and you'll see it's like a Getty image or something like that, or what they call file photo, right? You have to look in the corner of the photo, file video or whatever. And you're going, wait a second. There's this stuff going on. And if it weren't for the fact that everybody had these cameras and videos on their smartphones, we wouldn't have anything. But the problem with that is that, they're not reporters, they're not journalists. People say, oh, they're citizen journalists. Well, they're not really. No, they're just people that took a picture of a thing, but we don't know the context. Right? It's like even when there's these tragic events, flooding events and different stuff, and you get all these cameras and the news people buy the footage or show the footage or whatever. It's like it's not like a professional news organization where you've got the vantage point where they were, right? Their location on a map within that particular city, the geography of the region. The facts. Give us the facts. The reporting. Report it. Right? It's like I say, what's happening in South Africa or has happened. I don't know what's going on there now. Nobody's even talking about Venezuela anymore. Right? That's like who knows? Is anybody alive down there? What happened? What happened with the Cubans were like rioting and stuff. Did they like mow them all down with machine guns or something? I mean, what's going on there? We don't know. Right? What happened with these like Uyghurs in communist China and these people that are selling organs and stuff and these death camps they have out there, gulags and stuff. Nobody covers that. One or two leaked out smartphone camera things, a couple of dissidents, a couple of people who, managed to sneak out of the country. But it's like our news media has no interest in that firsthand stuff. Well, anyway, so we don't know, you can't trust the news for anything, right? You just can't trust them. It's sad, but it's true. And, so that brings you to this idea of how do you know, you don't know what you don't know. What am I shirts available at TonyCaravanLive.com. And in many cases, like everything you know is wrong. Because they're just, you don't know the truth. You get half truths or truth through some sort of filter, that has to, has to fit some sort of narrative or some sort of ideology. It's got to fit. It can't go against the grain of something. And so things that may well threaten humanity itself, such as the sun nova, sometime between now and the next 20-some years, any time now. Like I said before, when I say that, I know there's people out there going, well, at least we got 20 years, It's like, no, you don't get it. We can't be sure of the cycle when you're on a 12,000-year cycle. That's the crux of the matter, right? You can't say, you can't pin it down to a day or a year when you're talking about 12,000 years or 72,000 years. You can't say. I mean, some people try to do that, and every time somebody does that, they're always wrong, right? I mean, we can't even be as sure of our calendar. There are people arguing about, what's the real date, right? True, really. We don't know. How do you know? We don't have, the idea is that, we have, you have the printing press, the printed word, after after the Dark Ages, in 15 whatever, Gutenberg press, I've talked about this before. The Chinese had printing, but it was more like rubber stamping type of stuff, right? But it was still printing, so you have to, give them credit where credit's due. But it was, it was Western civilization that basically created the, printing as we know it, as it developed over the past, say, 500-600 years, 500 years plus. But prior to that, people talk about, the modern era, right? And there's people that, the people that say, BC as opposed to BCE, right? AD, or after the Common Era, I find the whole thing preposterous. It's like, go with what you go. Well, go with what you have. What do you got to change it because of something? It's not, Anyway. If something was established for a certain reason, you don't just change it just because you don't like the reason that they decided this was year one. Okay? But the idea is that's not what I'm arguing about. The question is between, year one, whatever you want to call it, and year 2021, those 2020 years, do we know it was 2020 years since year one? Right? Can we account for every one of those years? Like, who knows? I mean, maybe we can. Maybe an astrophysicist and people like that can say, can look at the stars, and say, well, yeah, basically based on these observations, but still, even though observations, accurate observations, even though people have been observing the stars for a very long time, they didn't have the sophisticated equipment that we've had in recent years. I'm just trying to say you only know what you know, and you don't know what you don't know. And if you can't, and it's like, so then it comes down to faith. And that's why I say scientism, because it's no longer science that children and people are being taught in schools and that the media is reporting. They're reporting scientism. It's a belief system based on certain ideologues who want to push, their philosophy or their agenda onto people. It's no longer based on the scientific process, right? Because they don't allow discussion, argument, right? Experimentation, duplication, of the experiment under, the same conditions in a different lab, et cetera, et cetera. We just hear these things, and then they're reported to us, or they're given to people in schools and presented matter of factually. But in reality, like in my example with the car hitting a pole, well, what if I just said to you, hey, it was weird, a car hit a pole the other day right in front of my house. And so then you just have to believe me. I don't have a picture of it. It didn't happen while I was doing a live show. Right? You see? But I present it matter of factually. Yeah. And you'll say, well, but will I believe you? Yeah, but it's not the way, that's not how science is. Science isn't a belief system. That's scientism. Science is facts, the presentation of facts, studied. And when it's not provable, and reproducible, it's considered a hypothesis, and then maybe eventually a theory. Okay, but up to that point, which it still isn't a fact, you don't present it as matter of factual. But they present things like this, 0.004 CO2 thing, and man, as matter of factual, as if they say the science is in, the science is not, going like, what science? And why isn't anybody talking about this Earth catastrophe thing or the Younger Dryas period, right? Do they think that Noah's flood is still just some biblical story? And they ignore like I don't know how many hundreds of other flood stories documented from around the world. It's like I said yesterday, I believe I said it yesterday, is that there are more writings, right? Actual writings, things that are either carved in stone, found in scrolls, recorded history that are so-called metaphysical, because that's the way that people today present this. Anything that goes against their own scientism dogma. Then there are actual so-called scientific observational factual things. See, science is only a couple hundred years old. Modern science. But we have thousands and thousands of years in records of things that paint a completely different story. And that's just an interesting concept. That's not to say, and I'm not trying to say, okay, well, then all those thousands of years of stories are more correct than the stuff that we currently know. But I'm saying the evidence is overwhelming, if we were presenting this in a court of law, that there's, these things have been documented for up to 12,000 years or so. And those people who are in denial have only been studying these things for decades or maybe a century or more. So, there comes a time when, the sheer number of statements has to be taken into consideration. So if there are, several hundred stories of a flood occurring 6,000 years ago that was worldwide, global flood, and then there are some academics saying, oh, that's just some myth, right? Happened. This is some river overflowed in the Middle East or something, right? But see, that's not the case. In studying things like when we look at the Younger Dryas, I say we've actually found hard evidence. We have found the frozen mammoths, right? We have evidence that the oceans rose like 400 feet, something like that. That the continents were covered with ice, right? Sheets of ice. Like a mile high, right? There's evidence of magnetic pole shifts based on the study of archaeology, the magnetic field of, of how, how the rocks, the study of, geologists can tell you that stuff. They can prove it. This guy go out there with their hammers and, and brushes and stuff. So, you have to accept, see science as science, and so I just, there's two things that the takeaway of the show is what I was trying to get at. I'm just trying to get your mind, this is just a mind thing. I started by saying that, and we went through some different tangents here, and I got my digs in at the scientism, but to put all this stuff to, into wrap it up into some sort of something that makes sense, purpose for this show existing, put it that way, is that there are these cycles that we know of. We know that life has cycles because we see that firsthand in biology. All right? It's observable. We can observe the seasons cycles. We can observe reproduction, cycles. The reproduction system cycles. We can observe, other cycles of life, in nature. Solar cycles. And we observe all these things, and these things are not exact. We know that these cycles are not precise. Like I say, a woman's cycle, without getting into ridiculous details, are not entirely always on the exact time. They're not completely accurate. They fluctuate, due to various factors, but it's not like clockwork for every woman. Right? The seasons. They say, oh, it's the first day of summer. And that day it may be cold outside. In fact, this year, this June, I think, because I keep a gardening record here, a book, because I don't trust the stuff they do. But let's see here. Let's see. That's why I say you have to keep your own records. I don't even, I haven't looked back. I think what I wanted to do was like spring. Yeah, like things like snow dusting April 1st. I'm sorry for wasting your time. I can't. The paper in here is sticking together. Forecast through May 11th is overnight in the mid-30s. Okay. So it was May. In other words, spring was March, whatever the heck it is, and we had snow and and we were going down in the 30s as late as mid-May. Okay. And I think even the 30th, whatever, according to my records. All right. I'm sorry it took so much time. The paper was sticking together. So just because we say it's the first day of spring, doesn't mean flowers are blooming, April showers bring May flowers. Well, we didn't, sometimes you don't have April showers. So that's that. Solar cycles aren't exactly, precise. Sometimes they're a year off, solar maximum, solar minimum. And so we talk about these 12,000 year cycles. We can't be, 100% sure it's going to happen on a specific year even, right? And then we don't know about cycles that go beyond our comprehension and what we're able to study through. It's like a jet plane in front of my house. Like landed on the road. That sounds like. So, so we can go back, say, 12,000 years or so. It's like they keep pushing back. You ever notice how they constantly, they find anthropologists, they keep pushing back, humans. They find another skull or another body part, and they say, okay, well, humans seem to be this old or that old, right? It's like the more they dig, right, or in a different location, they're constantly discovers. This Göbekli Tepe thing was just discovered, I don't know how many years, a couple decades ago, whatever. It was buried under, or maybe just about a decade ago. But other than that, people were talking about a much, like the Sumerians were that was the cradle of civilization was Mesopotamia and things like that. So they were going back to 6,000 years or something. And so suddenly because of these digs, and then there was other confirmation in other locations around the world, suddenly they doubled the age of civilization. What they call modern, civilization. People that were actually, living in some sort of social cities, agrarian, raising animals, aware of this, that, the other, and having these abilities to do things. So, and this is a constant ongoing thing. So you can, like I said, you only know what you know, and you have to acknowledge the fact that science and the study of the various sciences are dependent upon what we happen to know at the time and what is observable, right? We can't just create, these matter-of-factual reports. You don't, are not matter-of-factual. They need to be qualified by saying it is believed, or to date, what we know to date is that, or certain archaeologists, certain geologists believe, they don't never preface stuff like that, right? They just present this thing. And then 2 years later, that some archaeological dig, they suddenly date something, and it's a couple thousand years older. And then they come out and matter-of-factually, as if that's fact. And the fact is, we don't know what you don't know. You know, that's the shirt I have. You don't know what you don't know. And the way they're teaching things now, that's why I keep that everything you know is wrong up, is because you don't know what to believe, man. It's like what's going on right now, you know, with, you know, that's what I'm saying, strange days ahead. Because, you know, you don't know if you should go out the house. You don't know if you should be wearing this thing on your face. You don't know what's going on. You know, you don't know, you know, the people say one thing and they're silenced. People say another thing on TV and then 2 weeks later they change their mind. You know, it's like this flip-flopping of, you know, that's not science. That's not medicine. You don't flip-flop. And you don't present something matter-of-factually and then contradict yourself a month or a year later. You know, you present it in saying, we believe this, right? And then you don't silence somebody, you know, who says, well, I don't believe that that's necessarily true, especially if they're a credentialed person, in which case many of these people who have been silenced have been in various areas of study, you know, recently, you know. You don't do that. You give them you let them make their, you know, present their case. You know, it's the idea of the kangaroo court is like the way politics and the media is run right now, this country. It's like, that's why, you know, many people are saying it's an authoritarian state. Because you don't, you know, because there is no voice of the opposition. There is no voice, you know, you don't have the right, right? The Constitution giveth and the terms of service taketh away. And so that's when I say it's a corporatocracy and people just are like, look at me with their like a blank stare, right? And when I say, oh, save America, forget it, you know, it's as bad as Build Back Better, people are like up in arms. It's like, well, you tell me, you know, what are you going to save when you live in an authoritarian state? And what are you going to save when, you know, it wasn't saved before? Right? It's like hope in something. It's like there was I don't know who the religious sect was. They're still around. But I don't want to say it because I don't want to get into some kind of religious thing. But there's a certain group of people, and I believe religion still exists today, that believe that the end of the world was going to come on such and such a date. Okay? This goes back like centuries. And it didn't happen. And the leaders, they went back and they recalculated it and blah, blah, blah. And they said, oh, yeah, we made a mistake in the calculations and it's going to happen on such and such a date. And so everybody got ready, you know, for the whatever, you know, to happen on this other date. And then it didn't happen. And I don't know if they did another calculation, if there was a third time or not. All I know is that same religion still exists today. And there are people that go there to their and worship in their churches or whatever. You see? That's how people are. That's how much people hold on to certain things and are so controlled and manipulated by dogma. Right? I mean, in the 90s, you know, it was like there was a similar thing going on in another subgroup of popular religion, a series of books and everything, right? And this was like 30 years ago almost, as if the end was near. You know, it's like the classic thing you used to see in the 60s, a guy holding a sign. The end is near, right? 50, 60 years ago. Then these things don't happen, but people just don't acknowledge the fact that they were wrong. Right? So, you know, you have to, the idea behind this is that, people are wrong. Humans are wrong all the time, And unless it's firsthand knowledge, unless you really, unless the science is there or the facts are there, you can't be sure about anything. And when you present this thing, you must preface it, or at least at the end of it, and say, well, this is what we believe to be true based upon here's why we believe this to be true, but we're not certain. We're not absolutely certain of that. And so when I talk about these 12,000 year cycles, right, or the 6,000 year flood thing, it's that we believe. Well, we know that there was an Earth catastrophe, a flood, and it was global in nature. Okay. We also know that the Younger Dryas period, existed. We have archaeological records of that. We know that sometime between 10,600 and 12,000 years ago, there was an Earth catastrophe, right? We know that this is an interglacial period, all right? We know we've had periods where the conveyor in the Atlantic where Europe, froze over, which means most likely the Atlantic conveyor had either slowed to such a slow speed or stopped that Europe actually experienced the real temperature it should experience, based on its location on the planet, right? See, England and parts of Europe are warmer than they should be because there's warm air brought up, or warm water brought up from the Gulf, which in effect warms the northern Atlantic. Okay, and there's names. I'm not going to get into the science behind that, but it's in simple terms, we always call it the Atlantic conveyor. And it's the idea, it has to do with fresh water mixing with salt water, and how something sinks down, and that just keeps this thing like this natural conveyor. It's pretty freaky, actually. It's one of those other weird, all these odd things that are so, it's like the human body. When people talk about, how, we're like, we're like Android-like. In a sense. Like there's so many things that just, the complexity of it goes way beyond, the idea of chance. Right? And people will argue that. I'm one of them. Right? It's just so, everything just, yeah. It's ridiculous. And the planet just so happens to have this conveyor that does this and that, the other, and the moon just so happens to be right at the right position and in this thing and all this stuff. There's all this like stuff. And so one way of looking at it is like, the mechanics of the universe is fixed, is created somehow, or it's clockwork. But the other way, and there's other people that you believe, like the nihilist idea or something, that nothing means anything. Everything's just, whatever. It's meaningless. And all I wanted to bring across on this show is to open your mind to the idea that that certain things we know, such as Earth changes and cycles, we know to have happened in the past. And many people now believe, and you see, but not, and I can't say this with certainty, and they don't say it with certainty, but believe that we're at the 12,000 year cycle, that there's a likelihood of a nova type of event occurring on the sun, meaning the sun's going to like shed some kind of shell towards the earth. The sun's not going to explode. It's not a supernova. And that's going to cause an earth catastrophe beyond anybody's wildest dreams. In other words, it's a near extinction event. Obviously, people survive these things. Those were our distant ancestors. And that's something that's just not being reported right now. And it seems to be way more, it's more important. And I wish more science was involved in the study of that, as opposed to putting out this bad science and ignoring the sun altogether as if the sun doesn't even exist. Because that's what NASA and the IPCC are basically saying. The sun, that doesn't do anything. It has nothing to do with the earth. So anyway, but we can't be sure of these cycles down to some kind of precise day or date or year or even decade. So this could happen anytime. In the past week or so, there's been like a lot of 7+ earthquakes. I mean, has it happened before? Yes. Do 7.0s, 7.5s and stuff occur every year? Yeah, they do. But, we've had a cluster of them. There seems to have been an uptick in volcanic activity. We're seeing, we have the South Atlantic anomaly. We have the magnetic field being weak. That's a fact. We've seen the migration of the magnetic South Pole actually leave Antarctica, and the migration of the magnetic North Pole. We've been experiencing more of these strange behaviors in the jet stream and so-called polar vortexes. The Atlantic conveyor has been weakening, and none of these things are based on cow farts or CO2 in the atmosphere. All right? CO2 doesn't affect the magnetic field of the planet. Okay? All right? And so, you have to understand that, strange things are happening and strange days are ahead. And whether or not we're headed for our catastrophic event in the next 20 years or tomorrow, no one can say with certainty. We can just look at the past, but it's worth exploring. And it's the same with these things that occur. And I realize I'm going over my time. I really don't like to go over this time, but just to end this. It's the same thing with, all of this panic that's going on right now and how little we really know about the things that are causing us, as a world, as a planet, to be like scared of going outdoors and being around people and being social and all of that sort of stuff. We're just not getting enough information. And people, every time someone tries to even get a little bit delve into that area, they seem to be like instantly like shut out. When all we really want is the truth, right? Or verification, right? That's the idea, the scientific, method. You don't want people to say the science is in, right? And when there are, hundreds of people who are disagreeing, with PhDs disagreeing, you don't say the science is in, or the science, it's not open, the topic's not open for discussion. And, and there's all this disagreement by like brilliant minds. And so we live in those times, and that's why strange days are ahead, because we're in this point where we live we already live in a corporatocracy. So, the fact of the matter is politics is an illusion, all right? But there are people still holding faith in that. So it's almost like politism or something, or governmentism, right? People actually still believe that there's this thing called the United States of America. It's truly a geographic location, but, it's been clearly taken over, all right, by it's become a corporatocracy. And that influence has been growing over decades. This is something that just didn't happen this year. All right, this has been taking hold for decades. And so at some point you have to accept reality. And you say, well, okay, what? So what? Well, the idea is, like I always say, then don't day in, day out get stressed out and hold this belief in some kind of that something that's going to change that's already happened. And likewise, don't go believing, in something that hasn't been proven to you. In other words, keep an open mind about everything, right? And constantly inquire the truth. And the best thing you could do is take care of yourself and your family and your friends and live a healthy and try to have a happy life, And I'm not, because I don't want to scaremonger anybody saying the earth is going to end in 20 years. We don't know if any of that stuff's going to happen. And besides, if it happens, it happens. So what? It would happen in an instant. You wouldn't even be aware of it. You really wouldn't be. You'd probably see some crazy things in the sky, that the people drew on these rocks, odd, weird, plasma, strange formations in the sky and stuff. And the next thing you know, well, it'd be over, So, I don't worry about that. I worry more about a Carrington event, like was on my, some solar thing, some solar event, basically taking out the power grid, or even just our failing infrastructure. They passed an infrastructure bill, and I know that they're not going to fix the infrastructure of the United States. There's no capability of it. I worry more about that, taking care of you and yours and just living a happy life, the pursuit of happiness and all that. And if any of these other things happen, they happen. But one thing I do know is to stay healthy. That's, if I want to end on a positive, stay healthy, get the sunshine, because the sun will boost your immune system. The sun UVB rays are good for you. I mean, not in extreme amounts, but yeah, get out in the sun when you can. Get it 20 minutes, a half hour. Get sun. Don't get sunburned, right? But get sun. Breathe fresh air. Eat healthy food, right? And hope for the best, because we don't know. Like I say, you don't know what you don't know, because they're not telling us everything. And I don't like that at all. As somebody who studies certain things, I don't like the idea that I could go to YouTube and I could watch like two doctors, like and people on the front, what they call frontline physicians, ER doctors and stuff. And I don't like the idea that they are saying something that's different from something that I might see somewhere else. I don't like that idea. That bothers me. But there's nothing we can do about that. That's the times we live in. And it seems that we have an authoritarian, state right now, and it's a corporatocracy, and that things are happening for the sake of, predetermined agendas. There's nothing we can do about that. They're in charge. They have the influence. I mean, lobbyists have always influenced government. It's just that now the government has become a corporatocracy. So when you have big tech, big pharma, military contractors, the Fed's doing all kinds of crazy things to keep the economy afloat and the Wall Street numbers up, right? And then and all this craziness. It's the same with what goes on in Afghanistan. They could have, gotten rid of those poppy fields a long time ago and stuff like that, but they didn't. Now look at that place. And so what is this whole idea is just to, create another war so that these guys could sell these, drop these $1 million each bombs and profit, war for profit. I don't know. It's all crazy. So you don't know what to believe. And so That's why I cut the cord with the TV altogether. Because I can't believe, I don't know what to believe. And I'm not going to tell you what to believe because I don't know what to believe. It's very frustrating in that regard. But don't let it stress you out. You know, the idea is that just be aware that all these things are happening and are possible. But at the same time, you know, just live your life. I know it seems like a contradiction and me having this weird picture up with the sun, you know. But, you know, that's actually an old picture of the sun. So, you know, that kind of thing happens. We just have to hope it's not directed at Earth anytime soon. Right? Anyway, this was kind of I guess this was more or less just a free flow of consciousness than anything else show. But yeah, it's, strange days ahead. That's for sure. And, you know, if you're down in the Gulf states, you know, keep an eye out for that Fred. And I feel sorry for those people in Haiti, that Grace. It looks like it's going to be, you know, adding insult to injury down there. So that's, I hate to see that happening. So otherwise, other than that, stay tuned to this channel. Not today, but I'm here every morning. And good morning. If you go to visit TonyCaravanLive.com, there's some links to some of my other sites and links to various things and ways you can, you know, help support the channel. I'm demonetized. If you saw a commercial on this channel, I didn't get anything from it. But, you know, if you buy a shirt or a mug or something like that, I might make 50 cents. But every little bit helps, and I'd appreciate your patronage. And don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and, you know, check out some of the older videos. There's some good stuff we've covered, topics we've covered. And